Hello and welcome back to the NOTCAST. If you're a repeat viewer, or welcome if this is your first viewing. About twice a week, I talk to my phone about things that interest me. Sometimes they even interest other people, which is great news. Today, I am talking about David Bowie's wilderness years between 2004 and 2013, and his film work and his top 10 films, or at least my idea of what his top 10 films are. Yours is probably very, very different indeed. Number one will surprise you. It'll probably surprise you because not enough people have seen it. I think it's really very good indeed. I'm also talking about the change in his career between 2004 and 2013. Primarily as he had formed his own label, ISO, in 2002, after Virgin decided not to release the Toy album. What were you thinking, guys? Somebody somewhere at Virgin Records is going, oh, I know. Well, actually, more likely they're not at Virgin Records anymore. They're more likely unemployed, stroke retired, stroke very rich. Who knows? But I'm still kicking that cold off. Sorry about that. So Bowie formed his own label and had distribution rights to Columbia, which gave us the world the Heathen, Reality, Next Day, Nothing Has Changed, and Black Star Records, which are generally very good indeed. He didn't need to ask anyone's permission to appear as a guest on anybody else's record at that point because he was his own record company. And the first thing that he did in terms of guest appearances was on a record or on a song called Isn't It Evening by Earl Slick. Long-standing Bowie fans will know that Earl Slick was Bowie's guitarist on and off between 1974 and 2014, playing live with him on several tours and on several records. And Earl Slick had made his own album and needed a guest vocalist for a particular song. Asked David if he was available, and he did, and he recorded a song called Isn't It Evening, which is, to me, a great, really solid latter era Bowie song that not enough people know. It doesn't feel like he's guesting on somebody else's album. It feels just like a David Bowie song, which is probably the best way of making a guest appearance. That sense of, this sounds like David Bowie always belonged on it, if that made sense. And I think it's a lovely song. I really enjoy it. And hopefully, thanks to the contractual variances or vagaries of 2003, it will appear on an upcoming box set where you don't have to buy the Old Slick album separately. The second release, which I'll also mention, comes in two forms. One is called Saviour by Christine Young, that came out on an album in 2003. And the 2003 version is pretty good. But there's a version that was released a few years ago called American Landfill that's, frankly, absolutely bloody brilliant. One of my favourite later period Bowie songs, full stop. And it's been remixed, reimagined, re-recorded. You know I have strong opinions about reimaginings and re-recordings from previous episodes. But it's been rethought, and most of Bowie's vocal has been kept. Extra bits which weren't on the original Saviour have been used. And it just sounds phenomenal. I absolutely love American Landfill. It's one of my favourite latter period Bowie songs, and I recommend it highly to you. Although the last one that was released during his major public lifespan was this, good God, the soundtrack to Shrek 2, featuring Bowie's duet with Butterfly Butcher on a re-recorded version of Changes. If we could take the Butterfly Butcher element off and just have the Bowie vocal, wow. But we don't. So we have to live with what we've got. Fortunately, this also means I've got Shrek 2, the soundtrack album, on CD, which I am still not completely overjoyed about. After Bowie had brought the tour to an end, he had a period of convalescence. So apparently he had a number of heart attacks and health scares, moved from transmit to receive, and pivoted around, changed his focus. Because I think when he brought Duncan into the world, I think he was touring a lot and perhaps wasn't always there. Although obviously that's me taking supposition, hearsay and speculation from various biographies. I, of course, wasn't in the corner watching what was happening. But decided that his focus was going to be staying at home and being a chap called David, who occasionally would write a song. but more often would drop his daughter off to school, read a book, see a film, listen to a record, buy some expensive art, go on eBay and buy old David Bowie records he didn't have copies of, and live, probably, to use a terrible phrase, his best life. In 2005, he recorded vocals for a track called She Can Do That, which appears on the soundtrack to the truly terrible Hollywood movie Stealth, which is kind of like if somebody had made Firefox but crapper, I think. I've never seen Stealth and I have no intention of doing so. And he also appeared live on stage with Arcade Fire for 3 songs and released a Fashion Rocks EP as a download, which featured 5 Years, Wake Up, and another song performed live, which was one of his last live appearances. His last live appearance in the UK, and the last live appearance released to date, came in 2006, when David guested at this show. David Gilmour live at the Royal Albert Hall, featuring David Gilmour and Rick Wright from Pink Floyd, performing in a solo capacity at the Royal Albert Hall in London on the 29th of May 2006. I wasn't there. I saw this show on the final night, 31st of May 2006, when Nick Mason played drums. Now, going back in time and said, would you have preferred to have seen David Bowie and David Gilmour, or would you have preferred to see Nick Mason? Devil's bargain, because with Nick Mason, David Gilmour's solo band effectively became Pink Floyd. So to see Pink Floyd at the Royal Albert Hall, wow, what an experience that might have been. And as I was there, I can attest it really was something really quite special. Whereas seeing David Bowie and David Gilmour, that equally special. So there was no right or wrong decision to be made. I guess the last night would be the one where there'd be any guests. And I was right. First night also had David Bowie, of course. And the next day, David Bowie went to film his appearance in a TV show called Extras with Ricky Gervais, and what was his last known song for many years, Pug-Nosed Face, also known as Pathetic Little Fat Man. A 1.5 minute song where he returned to his vaudevillian roots from the 60s and did a parody music hall song where he ripped the piss out of Ricky Gervais, which frankly can't happen enough in my book. And then his last live performance was in America in 2006, performing Wild is the Wind, Fantastic Voyage, what an amazing song that is, and Changes live for a fundraiser. He also made, I think, his last appearance on film in 2006, doing an interview for this documentary, Scott Walker, 30th Century Man, which has as its exclusive extras bonus interviews with David Bowie. So this was his last appearance on screen, talking or interviewing, apart from a small number of promo videos that were released in very subsequent albums. And with that, he kind of faded out of life a little bit. He did guest vocals with Scarlett Johansson on a Tom Waits covers album, performing the tracks Falling Street and Falling Down, which were recorded in spring 2007. He remixed a track called Time Will Crawl for the I Select Bowie cover-mounted compilation with the Daily Mail on Sunday in 2008. Good God. And then in 2008, there was also the release of, 2007 saw the release of David Gilmour live at the Albert Hall. Also saw the release of Arnold Lane, David Gilmour and David Bowie performing live on CD single, 10-inch, 7-inch, and a special promotional release, David Bowie live at the, more correctly, David Gilmour live at the Royal Albert Hall. This features the only audio release of David Bowie and David Gilmour performing Comfortably Numb. It's not been released anywhere else officially apart from on the DVD. So the only place to get the audio CD version of it is to get the 3-track promotional CD, which is bonkers, because if I was the estate of David Bowie putting together the greatest hits album, surely Arnold Lane and Comfortably Numb by David Bowie and David Gilmour should be on the record, especially considering Arnold Lane was the single. But I don't make the decisions, so there we go. 2009 saw David move into the role of being effectively the celebrity husband, who was seen in a somewhat mute form, smiling on various red carpets when Iman was doing her charity work, or when Duncan Jones launched his film Moon, which is a great film, very underrated, Moon. And Moon also opens with a title card that says, "Where are we now?" A hint of where he was going to go next. At this point, Bowie had started to become effectively a legacy or a myth, almost a museum to his own once brilliance, which of course turned itself into the David Bowie Is museum and memorabilia exhibition that travelled the world as an effectively a David Bowie artwork. I saw that in Barcelona in 2017. Bought this t-shirt there, actually. David Bowie is a human being. How cruel it is to taunt me with what was no longer the case. And I can't remember the year that this came out, Arcade Fire's Reflector album, he also sang a guest vocal on one of the tracks, but I can't remember what year it came out, so I can't tell you. There was also guest appearances with TV on the radio, with a number of other bands as well, which I will post links to. Kashmir doing The Cynic, and as I said, Province by TV on the radio around about 2005, 2006. So he wasn't completely absent. He was out there, and if you know where to look, you can hear him doing lovely bits of backing vocals on various songs and going, "So close, sing the rest of the song." Of course, following his death, the track Saviour became transformed in a new form into American Landfill by Christine Young, which, as I've said before a few minutes ago, is absolutely fantastic. But that's not all he did. He appeared in a couple of films, had a couple of cameo appearances, and here is where we're going to talk about David Bowie as an actor. David appeared in a lot of films, actually. Some of them very short, some of them slightly longer appearances, some of them terrible, such as Yellowbeard, which I saw in 1983, where he had a cameo whilst he was on holiday as a pirate. Yar! He also kind of had lead roles in a couple of other films which aren't particularly good. One is called Just a Gigolo. But here I'm going to go through my top 10 David Bowie movies in reverse order. And you can probably tell which one's number one by the fact that it's placed somewhere on the screen. Which one is it going to be? You can guess, is it going to be The Man Who Fell to Earth, or is it going to be Into the Night? Who knows? Well, I know. And here we go. So, number 10 on the list, 1986's Labyrinth. This film is so loved by so many people, and I completely understand why, but I have very little nostalgia for it. Thinking about it more as David Bowie's role as opposed to a film, I'm not a huge fan of Jim Henson and his creature features. Films like Dark Crystal, for example, Labyrinth and so on, they're all very well done, technically very well executed, especially Muppets Christmas Carol, of course. But Labyrinth is the one where lots of people look at Jareth and think, wow, what an amazing role he had. Actually, I was more impressed by the very obvious codpiece in Labyrinth than I was by anything else. I think as a film, it's got a very good approach, and I really like the idea of the way in which it tackles themes like temptation, innocence, and duplicity, trust, and lies and half-lies and truth obscured in lies and all that kind of stuff. There's a really interesting job of detailing that, but at the same point, it's a Jim Henson creature movie, and those aren't always amazing, it's fair to say. But I think he does a really good job of it. I completely see why people love it, but it's not my favourite. Now, number 9, and I don't have this on DVD, but it is available on YouTube, is Basquiat from 1996, in which he plays an absolutely convincing imitation of Andy Warhol in the life story of the painter Basquiat, and Bowie owned Basquiat, by the way. I saw it in person when I went to Sotheby's for the auction in late 2016 of his effects, which I'll talk about, I think, some other time. But being able to see the artworks, which clearly meant a lot to him, and being able to draw the correlation between some of those artworks and some of the lines in some of his songs was powerful and poignant. I stood in front of a painting, I can't remember the name of it now, and it was a kind of like a depiction of the fields of England in the 1890s or thereabouts. I'll post the name of it in the comments. And it just reminds me of the line that is in the Black Star album where it says, "If I never see the English or British evergreens, it's nothing to me." And I was like, it's not really nothing to you, is it? You'll never go back home again. And he knew when he sang that, he was probably dying, was never going to get a chance to go back to the UK. So Basquiat was a very good film. Well, at least his part was very, very good in it. Number 8, Twin Peaks, Fire Walk With Me. I've talked about David Lynch movies and how much I love them and ranked them, of course, with Twin Peaks The Return being my A number 1. Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me is both brilliant and useless, in so much as it tells a story that didn't need to be told. It also, sadly, predicted the fast approaching Star Wars Phantom Menace, being a prequel that nobody asked for, that told the story of the last 24 hours of Laura Palmer. And in it, Bowie plays a FBI agent who went missing, who appears in flashback, and he's really very strange, but clearly was also shot in his Tin Machine era. So we have some very, very bizarre suits and some very blonde hair. Number 7, and this is where we get to the really good stuff, and I think this one will be a surprise to some of you. Absolute Beginners. Now, Absolute Beginners has not been issued on DVD in the UK that I know of. This is a German DVD. Luckily, the title hasn't changed. Otherwise, probably wouldn't have picked it out from the shelf. I sat there and go, I don't even know what the German for Absolute Beginners is. But there it goes. And I'm not even going to try and pronounce the German box art on the back. But this is I think this is such a really, really underrated film. It's directed by Julian Temple. And he has a very stylistic approach to his films. And if you're a Sex Pistols fan, you will know him from The Great Rock and Roll Swindle. And Absolute Beginners is a hyper-stylized recreation and retelling of a 1950s London that maybe did and maybe didn't exist. And it has Bowie in it. It has an advertising salesman who takes the lead character under his wing and then doesn't. And he has this wonderful line that's on the gatefold to the 12-inch single of Absolute Beginners, which is, "We don't sell reality. We don't sell things. We sell dreams." And it's a film that, to me, seems to be the most obvious of the theatrical and cinematic worlds which Bowie lived in to try and explain his childhood, the life that he had growing up. Because it's set at the time when Bowie himself would have been 11, 12, growing up in Brixton, and before he went to Beckenham, aware of the big city that was just a few stops away, and he could get to if he really wanted, but was full of scary teddy boys and grown-ups and people drinking and fighting and having sex and driving mopeds and things like that, or riding in cars with boys, as the song and book would have had it. Absolute Beginners is really great, actually, in capturing a stylized version of a reality that existed for a short period of time in the late 50s, maybe the early 60s, before the Beatles' first hit singles started coming into the world and changed the landscape of the reality. Number 6, and this is one more of you will have seen, The Man Who Fell to Earth. Bowie plays an alien landing on Earth in human form, trying to understand what it is to be alive in 1975 on the planet Earth. Nicholas Roeg's iconic science fiction odyssey. Apparently, this is the 40th anniversary, which has been rescanned from the original elements, rebuilt and generally made shinier and better with a whole bunch of extras. It's a strange, unusual film. The type of film which doesn't get made very often, and if it does get made these days, it's by people with no money and no budgets, and it goes straight to streaming and hardly anybody watches it. I think the phrase auteur is probably overused, but it's most definitely the style for The Man Who Fell to Earth, because there's no way anybody would sit down and go, we need to get Ed Sheeran to play an alien from another planet. Because, frankly, Ed Sheeran, you aren't interesting enough. Sorry, man. David Bowie is. Number 5 is The Hunger, directed by the much missed and much underrated Tony Scott. This came out in 1982. And it says nothing human loves forever, which is absolutely true. But it's a film that kind of tells a story about a human and a vampire that fall in love and the tragic ending which inevitably must happen inside that. And if you've ever been in a relationship that's felt doomed right from the start, and you know it was doomed right from the start, you know it wasn't going to work, but you still, blindly, hoping against hope, persisted with the idea that it might work, that you might defy the odds. You might not listen to the noises in your head telling you this is a really bad idea. The Hunger is a film for you. Sad to say, I've been in a couple of relationships like that where all my instincts were telling me this is going to end terribly, but at the same point, part of me was going, no, it won't. It'll end okay. I'm going to go for this, and I'm going to defy the odds, and it's going to work. No, it didn't. It absolutely didn't. And there we have it. And The Hunger is to me a film when I see, or when I think about certain relationships, which are a long way in the past now because I'm old and boring, reminds me of that sense of misguided optimism that I had at the time. And then the slow dawning reality that it's not quite going to go the way you hope it is. In the interest of full transparency, over 20 years ago, I was in a brief relationship with somebody who was most definitely an alcoholic and trying to hide it. And the things that appeared attractive at the start of that relationship, that sense of being exciting, unencumbered, thrilling, it was intoxicating to be around. But then there came a point where you go, well, what goes up must come down. And then there's the element of the day after where you start to go, this isn't going particularly well. This is going to end terribly. And then as a person, you become almost collateral damage in that you're a kind of like a bystander as that person then goes off and does things which are ill-advised, and you end up having to take responsibility for or accepting the consequences of that. The Hunger is a film that really kind of delves deep into that, and it's tragic, and I love it dearly, but I think you have to be in a certain very particular mood. And if, the first person you ever went out with is the person you're still with now, and you've had a long and happy relationship with them, The Hunger's a film you might watch and go, not quite sure what's going on there. Who knows? So number 4, 2006 is The Prestige, directed by Christopher Nolan, Bowie playing Tesla, the mad inventor, stroke discoverer of strange and unusual technology. I don't want to spoil this film for you. I think this is a very underrated film. Like the subject of the film itself, the story is a magic trick that requires a suspension of disbelief and the ability to look somewhere else, because what's actually happening in The Prestige that's revealed throughout the course of the film is all right there in front of your eyes, right from the off, if you know where to look and how to look, but you may not necessarily be looking for it. The Prestige is... I love this film. It's a very meaningful film to me about ambition and power and responsibility and deception. And his role as Nikola Tesla was very, very, very clearly nobody else was asked to be in the post, or nobody else was asked to do the role. And Christopher Nolan had to really go back. Normally when somebody says to Christopher Nolan, no, I don't want to do it, he'll go for his plan B. There was no plan B. Bowie had to be Nikola Tesla. And it really, really shows. He does a phenomenal role in this, but he's only in it for about 5 minutes. But what an amazing 5 minutes it is. And talking of roles that you shouldn't recast, when I think it was Villeneuve was writing Blade Runner 2049, the idea that he had in mind for the mad tycoon was David Bowie, and he couldn't get David Bowie on the account of David being suddenly and unexpectedly dead. So he had to get Jared Leto, and frankly, he made the wrong call there. He really did. Personally, I think actually Rutger Hauer would have been a great choice in Blade Runner 2049, but I know that would have been a little bit controversial. But there you are. Number 3. So we're down to the last 3. My favourite 3 Bowie films. And why? Well, Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence is number 3. It's one of the few where he effectively had a lead role out of the ones that are in there. And I think Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence is a wonderful film. It doesn't get enough love. There's the song by Richie Sakamoto, or Richie Sacramento if you are in Mogwai, which is all over the soundtrack. But also, although what's strange is it's a film around life inside a concentration camp in Japan in the Second World War, English prisoners and combatants that brought dishonour upon themselves by daring to not die, and the way in which people are forced to live inside environments and structures that they would not have chosen, do not like, and cannot leave. To me, when I was watching Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, really, really reminded me of going to a neurotypical school when I was younger in the 80s. I know I am old. I loathed going to school with every ounce of my body. To me, going to school felt like being in prison. I couldn't leave, and I was trapped with all these people that I was just a prisoner of geography with them. I had nothing in common with 99% of the people at my school. I didn't understand the society that there was, the arbitrary rules that existed, the arbitrary flexes of power to show nothing apart from the fact that they had power, and the completely bonkers way in which life and reality was interpreted by the structure that lived in there. To me, being at school, even though I got to sleep in my own bed and went home at the end of every night, felt like I was enduring a prison sentence that I couldn't escape and had no opportunity of parole. I mean, if you're in a job and you don't like it, you can find another job, right? If you're at school, really, really difficult in the 80s to find another school. And the same way that in which Bowie's character in Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, works in a very determined fashion to create a reality that works for him, or to bend against the edges as an exertion of power. Now, you can say that there's a thing around pathological demand avoidance syndrome, which is not necessarily the case that's in here, but more around the fact that as an individual, the ability to have dominion and agency and control over your own environment, the ability to talk fluently and fluidly around what you believe and to be able to act out your ethics, as opposed to having to be forced to be somebody or something you are not in an environment you would never choose that you can't escape. Effectively, it's a really interesting film about self-determination, identity, power, control, and how you can define who you are by your own decisions and your own actions as much as possible. Or, to quote the Manics in the immortal track Faster, if you stand up like a nail, you will be knocked down, is possibly where Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence is going for. I really connect with this film. It's not easy, it's not fun, it's, as it says, audacious and original addition to the POW genre. But it's apparently, I'm going to read off the back here, a riveting exploration of racism, brutality, and the sparks that fly when cultures collide. That's one way of looking at it. Another one is it's about a man at war with the reality which he cannot change, and how he is trying to navigate his way through a reality that feels hostile to him. Really good film. Love this. Rate it very highly. I think if you watch it, you absolutely should. It's phenomenal. Number 2. So what's it going to be? Is it going to be the Linguini incident? Nah, of course it isn't. Last Temptation of Christ. This is a controversial film. And I think it's controversial because lots of people think if you're talking in a way that's less than completely 100% reverent about religion, you are obviously a heretic who needs to be burnt at the stake or crucified. I think The Last Temptation of Christ is an incredible, very, very powerful exploration of faith and belief, and how that then impacts upon the people around it, how it changes their lives, their decision-making process, the things they can and can't do, the lives that they're going to live. There's an allegory maybe, or a correlation between this and Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, in so much as about did Jesus ask to be the Messiah, or was that something that was imposed upon him? How was he going to navigate those responsibilities? How was he going to find a way through it? And Bowie's role, and he's only in it for one scene. I think he plays Pontius Pilate, and effectively offers the olive branch of redemption and salvation to him if he just gives up his ideas. And he's so calm and so measured and so utterly perfect in that role that I can't imagine anybody else could ever play that role quite so convincingly. And the rest of the film, whereas Mel Gibson's torture porn of the passion is, oh, just look, they did terrible things to him. He must be wonderful. The Last Temptation of Christ deals with this idea of temptation. And one of those temptations is, if you knew you could avoid unimaginable pain and suffering by just giving up your principles, would you do it? Really, really interesting concept. Can really see why Bowie has been drawn to this film, which leaves us to number one. Again, not the Linguini incident. It is a film that is not well enough known and not well enough loved. It is 1985's John Landis movie, Into the Night. Bowie is in this film for 2 scenes. He spends his total time on screen as 4.5 minutes. Yet he owns this film in a way in which is like watching him and just seeing him and you go, I want to see a film about that guy. Okay, so if you think about films that you watch where there's a character that's in it for one scene that totally steals the movie, think about the Baldwin in Glengarry Glen Ross. Think about the guy from Tomorrow Never Dies, Vincent Schiavelli, who believes he could shoot you from Stuttgart and not miss. I want to watch a film with those guys in, because those guys look really, really interesting to make a film about. Same with Michael Lonsdale as Drax in Moonraker. Bowie's character in Into the Night. I think the contract killer Colin completely towers head and shoulders above pretty much every other character that I've seen in this film. He's in it for 2 scenes, and he just turns up, walks up to Jeff Goldblum in one shot, and then just starts talking to him, and just carries this air of absolutely kind of calm, measured, psychopathic, crazy fucking malice that isn't him. Goes one of the most terrifying characters I've seen in a film, apart from Michael Rooker's Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. Into the Night is my favourite David Bowie film, because I would watch a whole movie of that guy, and his character is the contract killer. It's fair to say, although there's no spoiler in that. He tells you within the first 20 seconds he is. And he just has this air of just calm detachment around any situation that he's in. He has absolute mastery and control of, has already thought through all of the possible permutations of what could possibly happen, and has decided his best approach is to give somebody just a calm talking to, and just sidles up to Jeff Goldblum and goes, "You're very good, you know. You're really very, very good. I'm amazed we haven't met." And Jeff Goldblum, of course, being Jeff Goldblum in 1985, just before The Fly, just after the adventures of Buckaroo Banzai, acts like life will find a way, and does this wonderful kind of befuddled, bemused thing about a person that's so far out of their depth that they don't understand what's going on to them. And he has a conversation with Bowie, and it's just one conversation, and you end up going, my God, that's so influential. If you watch The Office with Ricky Gervais and his kind of awkward, not quite fully comfortable in his own body, kind of slightly dorky, square English guy, that is, Bowie's Colin from Into the Night, magnified 100 times and transported with a Star Trek transporter beam into a boring office that sells paper and photocopiers. It's an incredible cameo, and I just watched this character and I thought, I want to see the rest of that guy's story. I want to see the rest of that film. I want to see what happens. I want to see how he gets to this point. I want to see the other jobs he's worked on. I would absolutely shovel that into my big fat face and enjoy it and think it's one of the best and funniest films ever made. In fact, I'm going to go further than that and say a film I wished existed that could never possibly have existed was a 1980 movie in which Bob Hoskins' character from The Long Good Friday and Colin intersect in London's Docklands in the very early 80s, before Colin then goes off to America and becomes this ruthless contract killer, the kind of which you don't see on TV screens. There is a second scene in the film with David where he's equally as assured, but also is then also revealed to be out of his depth and not fully in control of the situation, and a little bit clumsy and a little bit gawky and a little bit making this stuff up as he goes along. And those 2 scenes alone, 4 minutes of screen time, are, to me, his finest on-screen achievement, because I'm watching it and going, I need to see the rest of that film. It's like there's a whole other film of genius and madness that you don't get to see. You only get to see him in two scenes. Like he intersects into the night, but there's his own film that's going on that is going to be at least as good as anything else made in the 80s. And I really want to see it. That is why Into the Night is my favourite David Bowie film, because he gives us a film's worth of entertainment in 4 minutes in Into the Night, and it's wonderful. And I want to see the whole film with that character in, which doesn't exist and can't exist. But it's very good, It's really very, very good. I'm amazed they haven't made it. So that is my Bowie top 10, which means I can now present them in order on the screen without having to worry too much about them. Obviously, we have Labyrinth and Twin Peaks and Absolute Beginners and The Man Who Fell to Earth, and not on DVD, Basquiat, and The Hunger, The Prestige, Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, The Last Temptation of Christ, and Into the Night. I rate these films highly. I think David Bowie is the best thing in them, and they're very, very good films indeed. So, hope you enjoyed it. Hope that you've got some new films that you might think, oh, I really want to watch these. And hope that you like that. And take care of yourselves and each other. I will see you all, hopefully soon. Hopefully, when I've finally got rid of this horrible cold, flu, cough, sniffle thing, which I've tried to keep from you throughout the course of this episode, but probably haven't succeeded. So, see you later. Adios, amigos. Take care of yourselves and each other. Stay beautiful. And I will see you all soon. Okay, so, ciao. And now I have to go and switch it off. So if you've made it all the way to the end, thank you for watching to the end. I know some of you watch these while you're doing work. Some of you watch these while you're doing housework and other boring things. Hopefully this has made this a little less boring. And if it hasn't, I'm really sorry about that. But I can only do the best with the talents that I've been given. And one of those talents is not making a re-recording of Dark Side of the Moon. See you all later. Bye.